The Vatican was silent, not the quiet we often hear in sacred places, but a heavy, aching silence. It settled over the walls like a fake shroud. Dark and slow, the sun rose behind the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, yet the day felt dimmer than usual. Birds high in ancient cypress trees refused to sing, and even the fountains whispered softly, as if afraid to break the stillness. Pope Francis was fading away. His breaths grew shallow, his voice barely a whisper of warmth it once had. His hands trembled, and his eyes no longer tracked the movements of those nearby. But he was awake. He made a simple request, not a prayer, not a speech, just a plea. Greatness Taban, he whispered, the name clear even through his weak voice. His aides hesitated. Doctors looked at each other, unsure. Was he hallucinating? But his gaze was steady and focused. Repeating himself, he said, Greatness Taban, my dog. One of the cardinals blinked. Holy Father, your dog. Francis nodded slowly. His family, he needs to know I'm leaving. No one argued. No one had seen him like this before, not as Pope, but as Jorge, an old man who only wanted to say goodbye to his loyal friend. The room grew quiet. The doctors moved back. The rules of protocol melted away because at the end of life, titles don't matter. Love is what truly counts. Esteban was not famous. He had no social media, no interviews, no official pictures of the Pope with his dog. He was a small mutt with short fur, uneven tail, and ears. His wag was more a rhythm than a greeting. The dog was Francis' best-kept secret. They had met years earlier in the Vatican gardens. Francis found him wandering, thin, limping through the rose paths. No collar, no owner. The security team wanted to remove him. Staff suggested calling animal services, but Francis looked into the dog's eyes and said, he knows pain, let him stay. The next morning, Esteban was still there. The same the next day. By the end of the month, he wasn't just a stray. He belonged to the quiet walks, the silent moments, the man he had come to love. They never made it public. The world didn't need to know everything. Francis once told a trusted cardinal, some things are between souls. Esteban became his morning shadow, quiet, steady, loyal, no barking, no tricks, just companionship. His Saturday at the Pope's feet while prayers were said, watched as Francis wrote in journals, nudged his knee during hard days. He asked for nothing except to be close. Now he waited under the olive tree where they had first met, sleeping peacefully. His human was dying a few hundred feet away. Inside the Vatican, clocks ticked loudly, every sound like a countdown. Inside the Apostolic Palace, time seemed to stand still. Pope Francis' eyes were closed. His lips parted slightly, but he was not yet gone. An aide ran down the marble hall, breathless. In his hand, a phone. We found the dog, he said. He's in the garden, sleeping but safe. No one knew what to do. They had prepared for many things, a new leader, national mourning, but not this. Not the last wish of a dying pope. Quiet orders were given. Normal barriers opened. Gates unlocked. The gates rarely opened to animals now. Under the olive tree, Esteban stirred. Something shifted. He lifted his head, sniffed the air, and knew. He stood slowly, pulled by memory, not command. The guards tried to stop him, but he needed no directions. He ran past fountains, shining glass, and shadows. Through centuries of history, pulse softly hit the cold stone floor in the quiet room where the Pope lay. Inside, the sound of the oxygen machine filled the silence with a gentle hum. Francis opened his eyes with effort and nearly whispered, "He's coming." No one had told him what to expect, but he knew. The room was still when the door swung open. Everyone frowned. See doctors, aides, priests. Time seemed to stop as they waited in tense silence. Esteban moved quietly in by himself. He paused in the doorway, tilting his head, ears twitching. Without hesitation, he strode directly toward the bed. Pope Francis turned his head, eyes hazy but flickering with a peaceful glow that no medicine could bring. The old dog's paws rested gently on the bed's edge. Wings stirred softly, almost as if asking, "Are you okay?" Francis' trembling hand reached out. Esteban nudged it with his nose, staying still. Where? They Saturday, a man passing away and a dog simply being. An unspoken bond held them together. A nurse wiped her eyes, and a cardinal looked away, overwhelmed. Francis whispered softly, barely a breath, "You kept your promise. You stayed with me till the end." His eyes closed and a smile formed on his face. Then he whispered his last wish. "Don't let him go back to the street. Promise me he will always be loved." An aide stepped forward, knees trembling. "He will. Holy Father, I swear, Esteban will always have a home." With that, Pope Francis took his final breath. It wasn't in a grand mass or with flashing cameras. He was simply holding Esteban's fur, surrounded by love. The bells of St. Peter's sounded at dawn. This was not a celebration but a silent mourning. News of his death exploded across the world. Headlines read, "Pope Francis dies at 88. Presidents, kings, and religious leaders sent condolences. Monuments shone white and gold. Flags lowered. Masses and pilgrimages were planned." Yet in the Vatican, Esteban refused to leave. Hours passed after Francis' death. The dog curled beside the bed in silence, not eating or moving. A few tried to lift him. Esteban growled softly, not in threat but out of pain. "Let him be," said the Pope's doctor. "He's mourning." 2 days later, the world watched as Pope Francis was laid to rest. The funeral was quiet, sacred, full of honesty. Thousands filled the square. Millions watched from home in silence. Leaders and pilgrims looked on. But one thing drew everyone's attention. Near the platform, a small brown dog Saturday still and watchful. It was Esteban's companion from the gardens. The Pope had asked to see him before he died, but he hadn't been part of this ceremony. He hadn't been brought forward. Instead, he simply appeared as he always did by the Pope's side each morning. Cameras captured him as the casket was lifted. Esteban stood slowly, took 3 steps, then laid down again. Flashbulbs lit up his image. It spread quickly across the world. A dog, a casket, and a bond stronger than words or titles. The Vatican later released a short statement about the strange, unforgettable scene. Hours after his final wish, the Holy Father was with his dog Esteban in his last moments. Their quiet love needed no words, no explanations. For 10 years, the world followed Pope Francis, but this moment revealed his true message. Love is simple. It's about who stays with you when you have nothing left. The morning after the funeral, St. Peter's Square was unusually still. The crowds had gone, the bells silent, yet Esteban remained there, resting under the same tree where he and the Pope had once walked. His eyes were open, but he moved little. He didn't chase birds or respond to voices. He was waiting, listening, mourning. People came and left, small gifts, candles, flowers, drawings of a pope and a dog under an olive tree, notes of thanks. "Thank you, Esteban," some wrote. "You were his last prayer. You showed us how to love without words." Later that day, the Vatican shared a second message. Esteban would stay in the Vatican gardens. He was loved and cared for by those who had been close to the Holy Father. He wasn't just a dog, was part of the legacy. A small space near the Pope's favorite bench was marked with a bronze plate, not for show, but to remember. It read, "Here they Saturday." One spoke to millions, the other listened to just one. Both loved quietly,